We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt Podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, find your safe harbor.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Sean Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, the owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I am happy to have a guest with me today. Now, before I get to and introduce my guest, I do want to also talk about our sponsor. Those of you that have been listening for even a little bit of time know that our sponsor is Sam Cohen. He owns Attorneys First Insurance, and they write errors and omissions insurance or malpractice coverage, basically, for attorneys and title companies all over the country. And that's all he focuses on, are attorneys and title companies. Now, I know he's here in Florida with me, and so he likes working with Florida attorneys. I also know that Sam has opened up in Texas and likes working specifically with Texas attorneys and title companies, but he can write anywhere in the country. So if you are anywhere in the country and you want to support the show and you know an attorney or title company that is either just formed or if they need to renew their coverage or if their coverage renewal is coming up in a couple of months and they want to renew their professional liability insurance, their malpractice coverage, send them over to Sam. That would be a great help to Sam and then a great help to me as well. You can reach him at sam@attorneysfirst.com or www.attorneysfirst.com. Sam is not going to hard sell. He's going to give you an apples to apples comparison of what you got or what you need versus what's available out there. He is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to malpractice or errors and omissions or E&O coverage. So please help our friend Sam Cohen by referring him an attorney or title company in Florida or Texas or anywhere really. So I do, however, want to turn my attention to our guest. So met him a couple of weeks ago through a mutual friend of ours, and the more we talk, the more we learn we've got more in common. We may get into some of that as we talk here today. But he is a financial coach, and he is the owner of a company called MoneyWorks Financial Coaching LLC. Now, he is not a financial advisor, but he is someone that can coach you and that can help you find your safe harbor, which is how we came up with the topic or the title of today's podcast. So I want to welcome my guest this week, Dan Bobick. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Sean. Well, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So real quick, for those of you, for those guests or those listeners that are wondering, what is a financial coach? What does a financial coach do?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I normally describe what a financial coach is using something familiar. So a lot of people know what a financial advisor does, and I get this question all the time. How are you similar? How are you different from a financial advisor? And a financial advisor is going to help you with basically three legs of a stool: your investments, your insurance, and then also planning, the planning of various items, estate planning or retirement planning, education planning, all of those kinds of things. And all of that is very worthy, very helpful, and good. I used to work in the financial advisory space, but a coach typically doesn't do any of those things. Sometimes a financial advisor will coach, but it's usually not their primary focus. Their primary focus is those three legs of the stool. The three legs for me are different. So we're looking at the mindset, how we think about money, what's important to us, what we prioritize, what our heart values are surrounding money, all of those kinds of things. Then we'll also talk about the mechanics. So how do our money lives actually work? We go really, really deep into the details, the day-to-day, and then also talking about goals and all of those kinds of things too. We focus particularly on cash flow. Cash flow is the lifeblood of our money life. How do we get money to invest with a financial advisor? Well, we take care of what we have today so that we can save money with the advisor. And then the last piece is accountability or developing consistency. The way to financial success, you might find that next new Amazon or whatever it might be, right? Cryptocurrency or whatever investment that might happen in some portion of, probability, right? But the probability of consistency is 100%, right? If you continually do the good actions with your money, saving, reducing your expenses, increasing your income, all of those kinds of stable items, that is a much more sure path to success than trying to pick the next big thing, right? So we have the mindset, how we think about money, and then we also have the mechanics, what we do with the money, and then the consistency or accountability. This is what we're going to keep doing with our money.
I know that you mentioned it within there, sort of buried within that answer was something I wanted to ask about, which is some of these conversations that we have, and I know because I have similar. I'm not a money coach necessarily. I think there's some aspects of that to what I do in terms of helping people get out of debt, but I wouldn't label myself a money coach necessarily. But
right.
It's a hard conversation to have. I guess, does it start with mindset, or can any one of these three legs? In other words, someone comes to you and says, I got the right mindset, I got the right mechanics, I just can't. I'm not accountable, so I don't track my expenses every month, or I don't track my income every month. Or do you find that it's always, sort of the mindset first that leads into the other two, or do you notice any patterns there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have some clients that know what they should do and know how to do it, but they never do it, right? So there is a sense in which part of that is a mindset issue where, okay, why is it that you know what to do, you know how to do it, but you're not doing it? So let's talk through it. Let's talk what's working for you, what's not working for you. If it's a family, husband, wife, how is that? How are your communications going, right? Is it one person in the relationship that is consistent and the other person isn't? Are you both not consistent? What's going on? So there's a lot of discovery that goes on because I try not to assume anything. So somebody might identify their issue as not having the consistency that they desire, but there might be other causes of that as well. So we kind of dig into what's going on first, and then we set it kind of all out on the table so that we can understand it. And then we say, okay, this is what we're doing. Is that what you want to continue doing? And if it is, okay, fine. If it's not, then we try to have other strategies, other tools to try to fix that and then move forward more consistently. I think one of the things that really helps my clients is that they have somebody to talk to. So a lot of times when we're talking about, okay, I'm not being as consistent as I would like to be, I'm not doing the tracking on or planning ahead or whatever it might be, it's because I'm not going to talk to my family about it because it's money. I don't want them to tell me what to do.
Right.
I'm not going to talk to my friends because I don't want my friends to know how much money I make or what struggles I'm going through. But I can talk to somebody who's outside of all of those circles in a safe place, confidentially, privately, and we can talk about those things, right? So it's a safe place to come. And when somebody knows they have another human being that they're going to talk to about this. So some of my clients say, I would not have done this, Dan, except I knew I had to come and talk to you. Right. And that's very powerful in a lot of cases.
Yeah, a lot of times it's that accountability piece of I've got to now talk to Dan about it, or I've got to talk to Sean about it, or I've got to talk to someone about it that, the homework's due. So we got to do the homework here to be able to talk about it. And I think mindset is, kind of a big deal there. And I think something that a lot of people overlook. One thing we said pre-interview is one thing I say to clients all the time. You didn't get into this mess overnight, so don't expect that you're going to solve it overnight. It's a process.
Exactly. If it's been a spending that's a problem, quote unquote, a problem, right? And there can be good spending and there can be bad spending, right? We don't assume that right from the outset, and it varies per situation. But people need somebody that they can come to and talk through those things with. And I'm sure your clients do as well. Sometimes they just need to vent.
Right.
What's going on? I'm doing these things. I think I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not getting the right result. What am I doing wrong? And it's that third party, that kind of external objective view that can be really helpful for people.
Well, and it may be that they're not doing anything wrong. They just need a tweak, or they need to, like you said, monitor it, or they need to monitor it differently. Or one of the things on your website that caught my attention when you're talking about what is your safe harbor, and there's some of those that we'll go into, but the last one kind of interested me, and it says you don't have to worry about finances. Take the agony out of your financial decisions by creating a framework that guides your decision making to keep you moving in the right direction. And so for me, what it sounds like to me is what you're doing is you're helping people not to avoid a wrong decision, but just to, I guess, prioritize so that they can make the best decision for where they are financially in terms of, I need to save X amount of dollars. I need to make X amount of dollars. I need to pay off X amount of debt. Am I thinking about that correctly?
I think so. Yeah. In large measure, what people generally have financial issues is not necessarily because they have, say, a lot of student loan debt or some other kind of financial pressure that they feel. A lot of times it's a mismatch between what they believe about money, what they value, and then what they actually do with it. So when we talk about building a framework, I firmly believe in people-centered processes. So you might have somebody who's more of a free spirit in their personality, and that's totally fine. But you want to have a framework that kind of provides an anchor so that you can have stability even though you're a free spirit kind of person. On the other side, you might have somebody who's very, very stable, right, to the point of immovable. And that's okay too, to an extent, but you also have to have some flexibility. So we need to have people-centered processes where we take the personality of the individuals and families into account as we build a framework. So you can think of the framework as an ever-present acknowledgement or recognition of future goals. And let's take today's actions that are consistent with those future goals. So one way I talked with my clients about said, okay, if you are Sean 10 years from now, are you going to look back at the Sean today in 2022 and thank him for the decisions that he's made, right? So are you going to be better off in the future than you were today because of the decision you made today? So basically we make today decisions with tomorrow in mind. Right.
Which is one of the other things we talked about, which I hadn't really thought about, but I like the analogy, was your financial planning, not financial advisor, but your planning of your finances as the analogy of driving a car.
Yeah. So, when we drive a car, we get in and we use the windshield for the most part. We might look in the rearview mirror a bit as the need might be. Maybe we're backing out of a parking space or something like that, or we're on the highway and we want to see as we're changing lanes, right? But when we come to our money, what we've been taught is, well, you look at your spending the month before and you see how you did. If you end up with more money than you started with, you think it's good. And of course, if you end up with less than you started with, that's not good. Well, those assumptions may or may not be right. The problem is that we're driving our financial car looking at the rearview mirror. So we don't know where we're going. We just are always focused on where we've been. So that can lead to a lot of guilt and shame for people because they don't look at a bright future ahead. They look at all the mistakes they made in the past, and then they just continue those mistakes going forward because they're not actively looking through the windshield as they're driving their financial car. So one of the things I try to do with my clients is let's change our orientation. So instead of always looking through the rearview mirror, wondering what we did and feeling bad about what we did in the past, we look forward to a better financial future, but we plan our money. So we tell our money what it's going to do for us rather than looking in that rearview mirror and wondering what happened to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember earlier days when I was running the law firm and my goal, and still is my goal today, is, as we record this, we're in March. I want to think ahead and say, okay, we're in March right now. What is my budget looking like in June, July, August? can I cover those expenses that month? The thought process being, I got March and April and May under control. Now I got to start worrying about June. And I think when you can get to that level, it makes planning, both personally, professionally, it makes planning a lot easier, which actually, so one of the things I do want to clarify real quick, you can work with both businesses and individuals, right?
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yes. So I work with small business owners, self-employed owners who are really, really good at what they do. And they didn't necessarily start their own business to be a business owner, but they own a business because they want the freedom, the flexibility. They want to be able to secure their future. But they are good at whatever it is that they do. Maybe they're an artist or a musician or electrician or a plumber or whatever it might be.
Or an attorney.
Or an attorney, right? But they didn't start their business in order to be a business owner. They wanted to just have that freedom and flexibility so that they're working directly for their clients rather than working for somebody else.
Right. And then once you start that business, you learn that freedom is sort of a myth because now you're working for the clients. But
right.
But we can, and that's one of the other things that's in your safe harbor on the front page is the improved quality of life. So I joke about it, but yeah, I mean it is getting control of your finances will definitely help with your quality of life. I do want to give out real quick. So the website, if you want to check out Dan's website, it's moneyworkscoaching.com. And of course, I'll have that in the notes for anyone that wants to click on the link to go visit the website, moneyworkscoaching.com. Or you can contact Dan directly, dan@moneyworkscoaching.com. Any other social media links or any other places you want to send people, Dan?
I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Those are the two other primary places where I'll post content occasionally and connect with people on those two sites.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to go real quick too into a couple of things here. I also saw about some of the types of clients that you've helped, because I think that's a lot of the same people that I help, and I think it's a really good conversation. And the first one on there, couples expecting their first child but struggling with debt. And I think you could even separate both of those and say some couples expecting their first child, because those of you that have kids on the way or planning on having kids, that totally changes your finances. But then also struggling with debt, which is, and adding the two together, obviously, that makes for people that you can help. But what I think the point there is life changes. So having kids, maybe getting an empty nest. The kids are now graduated and on their way to college, or other life changes, divorce, death of one of the spouses or the other. All of those different types of life changes are points where I think you can be valuable to help your clients, right?
Definitely. And as we see, say, in a case of expecting our first child, and it will change your financial life forever, right? You'll have additional expenses for sure, but then there's also all of the other parts in life. And when we look at our money, it impacts everything else. And in some sense, everything else also impacts our money. So when we have additional stressors, however much we love them, right, in our children, when we're talking, if we're already stressed about money, those other external factors are going to stress us even more. But if we can get our money in order and at least have a plan in place for reducing stress, making consistently good decisions with our money that's going to have tomorrow in mind, right, then we can more easily deal with these other aspects of our lives. Even the case of not getting enough sleep at night, right, because the newborn is crying all the time.
Right.
So, but if we can reduce the stress that money gives to the rest of our lives, we'll see ripple effects throughout, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, and that some of the things you don't think about when you have a kid is the formula, or are you going to breastfeed, and if you breastfeed, what kind of nutrients does mom need to make sure that she's doing what she needs to for the baby? And then diapers, and good Lord, diapers are expensive and formula is expensive. And then, do you want to you should start a college savings plan for the kid. And and I never wanted to I've had to do it a handful of times, and it absolutely killed me for one of my kids to say, can we get a blank? And my answer was no, and I came up with a reason, but behind the reason was we just don't have that in the budget right now. So no, I can't get you that new blank this month. Maybe let's work on it next month, or let's work on it for your birthday, or let's work on it for the holidays. And so all those issues come up. And you've got on here as well retirees who are trying to manage their cash flow, recent graduates who feel like they can't get out of their student loan debt. All of those big sort of life decisions. But you've also got on here business owners. So like you said, creative professionals starting their own businesses, owners who feel scattered. I thought that was a great a description, scattered about their personal and business finances. Employees employers who want to support their employees. All those different, those with large incomes, those with modest incomes. I mean, all those different people that you can help. Well, is there anything in particular that you wanted to we get maybe near the end? Is there anything in particular that you wanted to talk about or mention?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I've been thinking about as we're talking here today. And one of those is the modest and the large incomes. And I think a lot of people have the misconception that, oh, well, if you need a financial coach, one, there's something wrong with you. And that's not the case whatsoever. I have clients that earn six-figure incomes and clients that have more modest incomes. And the issues are the same. So the issue, generally speaking, is that people are not planning ahead. So they're not telling their money what to do for them. They're just letting their money happen. And then they look back and they wonder what happened, right? And yes, we're going to have those kinds of emergency expenses and all of those kinds of things. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the fridge will break, or the water heater will go, or whatever it might be, right? Those things are going to happen. We don't know when, we don't know how, but we know that they're going to eventually happen. So we can plan ahead for them. But generally speaking, we don't plan ahead for those other things too. So how much are we going to spend on entertainment for the month, or eating out, or groceries? We just say whatever it is that we need. Okay, well, let's get our needs in alignment with what we can afford as well, what our income will provide. Keeping in mind those future goals too, because we can't just spend everything that we have on today, right? We also need to look for tomorrow as well. So planning ahead can really put us in the driver's seat, so that our money is going to do what we tell it to do, rather than our money telling us what we can do.
Right. Well, and I think one of the other issues that I've seen, I've seen people that make six figures or high six figures, but they still have to come to me for a bankruptcy when things get overwhelming, because even though they're making, let's say, I've got one client now that I think makes around $300,000 a year. But he spends $350,000 a year because he doesn't have his spending under control, versus somebody that might make $60,000 a year. If they only spend $30,000 a year, they're going to end up being more, quote, rich than the one making $300,000 or $400,000, because they're able to save a huge chunk of it. And so sometimes I agree with you. It's that mindset of just because you get a raise doesn't mean you have to go out and spend more money. I mean, go out and celebrate, have fun, do what you need to do. But just because you get a raise doesn't mean you necessarily need to spend more money. We don't necessarily need to keep up with the Joneses anymore. Right, exactly. Yeah, and there's a name for that somewhat more recently, but a lifestyle drift. So as our income increases, our lifestyle just naturally inflates along with it. And sometimes it inflates too much, and we go above and beyond, like the case that you're identifying there, where the person earns $300,000, but they spend $350,000. That person's not acting in alignment with the future goals in mind, right? And it all comes back to your mindset. So what you want to do
how you're going to do it, and then consistently putting it into practice.
Right. So again, if you want to reach out to Dan, it's moneyworkscoaching.com is the website. Also Dan at moneyworkscoaching.com. So where are you located again?
So I am in northwestern New Jersey.
That's right.
But I work with clients all over the country and occasionally internationally as well.
That's right. I remember you saying internationally, all over the country. So again, Dan is a financial coach. He's not a financial advisor, although he's got that background, but he's not a financial advisor. He's a financial coach. Well, thank you. I appreciate, it's interesting. I'll bring up real quick. We were talking pre-interview. Dan and I both happen to be runners. And so we were talking about that as well. And, one of the interesting things, one of my earliest podcast episodes, it looks like this one is going to be 312, but one of my earlier podcast episodes was an analogy of me running and how I use setting my goals in terms of what I wanted to accomplish as a runner to how to set goals for whatever, personally, financially, whatever it is you want. And so, I think having some of those outside activities that we have to also, I'm not going to say track and monitor, but sort of track and monitor, you how fast am I running? How's my energy? How's my stamina? How far do I want to go? How far do I want to go today versus tomorrow versus last week? Am I training for a race? Am I just running to run? All those issues seem to be intertwined, and it's that same, like you said, it's that same mindset, mechanics, and accountability. What's my mindset around running? What do I do when I hit the proverbial wall? How are my mechanics in terms of, am I drinking water? Do I have the right stamina? Do I have this? Do I have that? And then the accountability of, I don't care if it gets colder. I don't care if it gets warmer. I don't care if I'm, if I'm not feeling well, I might still go for a run, but not as long. It's all the same conversation. It's just, what do you want to apply it to?
Right. And as you were speaking, I thought of, as running is such hard work, and it really encompasses your entire body, right? Your lungs, your legs, your head, even everything goes into it. And it's such hard work. But you can later on, say at the beginning of the spring, like we are now when we're recording, and the temperature is starting to get nicer and people can get out, and say here in the northern states, getting out some more and being able to run. And then when you get into the summer and then maybe into the fall, you see the progress that you've made. And there's such a great deal of satisfaction in that, where maybe you were running a 12-minute mile, but then you could run a 10, and now you're running a 9 and an 8, and you see all of that progress in your distance, and it can just give that deal of satisfaction, and then that motivates you to keep working, right? Oh, yeah. And that's the same thing in our money as well. It takes hard work to be able to get a handle on your money and to keep going, but as you see the results, that can be motivation for doing even more with it.
Yeah, results in terms of my savings account is going up. Mm-hmm. Results in terms of my debt is going down. It's interesting. I had to go to the podiatrist earlier this week because with my sugar levels, we needed to do some tests to make sure I wasn't having neuropathy or any of those types of issues, and everything's fine there. But he took some x-rays of my feet. Well, I had seen the same podiatrist back in 2015 when I really first got into running because I was having some pain. We learned that my arches aren't really as good as they should be, and so we were dealing with those issues. But he actually showed me the x-rays he took of my feet back in 2015 and the x-rays he took of my feet earlier this week. And you could see in that 7-year time span, the bone density had gotten better. The bones were stronger. The spaces between the bones where normally you'd be worried about arthritis were more healthy. And so, you're right. When you go out running that first day, you don't think, oh, my bones are going to be better. Right. But then to look at it 7 years later and, oh my gosh. And it's same, like you said, with money, the same analogy. Had a client that came to me, wasn't ripe for a bankruptcy, wasn't a good fact pattern for a bankruptcy, had about $20,000 in debt, and just called me. This was about 2 years ago, gave them some tips, helped them a little bit with their budget, settled a few debts for them. And then they called me last week and they had finally paid off the last of it. So,
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've got a bajillion of those kinds of stories, but it underlies one of the first points we made, which is that, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't accumulate this debt overnight. You're not going to solve it overnight.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not limited simply to debt, but that's always the one that we kind of feel and very easy to identify. But I'm of the opinion everybody could use at least a conversation with a coach,
right?
Just to check in and say, am I doing this right? How am I thinking about it? Those kinds of things. And that's one reason why I offer a free consultation. It's just, if you want somebody to talk to, feel free. I think it's really valuable because we're human beings. It's personal finance, even our business finances are personal because they're us.
They're
right?
us,
especially
right.
As a self-employed owner. So we need to talk about these things and we can't keep avoiding it and then wondering why we're getting the same results. So
right.
It all begins with a conversation.
Yeah. And again, looking at the website, moneyworkscoaching.com, there is right there on the front, on the homepage, to book now, and then up in the corner, free consultation. So if you are interested in reaching out and having a conversation with Dan, you can email him, but probably the easiest way is just go to the moneyworkscoaching.com website and click on that free consultation button, and that'll get you started. So, well, Dan, I really appreciate you being a guest on this week's show. Thank you for your time and for your information.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, so I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Again, if you want to get a hold of Dan, it's dan@moneyworkscoaching.com, or just go to the MoneyWorks Coaching website and click on the free consultation button. This week's episode definitely feeds into one of the things that I like to say all the time, which is that I hope you have more money at the end of the month rather than more month at the end of the money. I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks again to Dan for being a guest, and we look forward to talking to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Sean or connect with us on social media. Sean Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.